Well, hello and welcome to the Daily Scripture Podcast. My name is Dr. Jerome Lavelle, and today we will be looking at the Gospel of Mark, chapter 3, verses 13 through 19. Jesus went up the mountain and summoned those whom he wanted, and they came to him. He appointed 12, whom he also named apostles, that they might be with him, and he might send them forth to preach and to have authority to drive out demons. He appointed the 12, Simon, whom he named Peter, James the son of Zebedee, and John the brother of James, whom he named Boanerges, that is, sons of thunder, Andrew, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas, James the son of Alphaeus, Thaddeus, Simon the Canaanian, and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him. Today in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 3, verses 13 through 19, we hear a description and the naming of the 12 men that Jesus appointed as his apostles. If one looks at the lists of the 12 apostles, one will find that the lists are somewhat different, slightly different in the names of the 12 apostles as they are referenced in the New Testament. Between the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and then Acts of the Apostles, where in each case there is a listing or reference given to the 12 apostles. For instance, if we were to look at each one of those references and then the 12 apostles, we see first Simon, also known as Peter. His name is given as Cephas in the Gospel of John, so Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and the Acts of the Apostles all refer to Peter as Peter. Andrew, Peter's brother, is given as Andrew in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and the Apostles. Then we have James, the son of Zebedee, is given in all of the Gospels as well as the Acts of the Apostles, although I believe in the Gospel of John, he's just referred to as one of the sons of Zebedee. John, the brother of James, is referred to as John. Then we have Philip, referred to as Philip in all of those references. And here's our first sort of difference is with Bartholomew. Bartholomew is referenced as that name in all of those references, except in the Gospel of John, he's referenced as Nathaniel. He's called Nathaniel. Thomas, doubting Thomas, is called Thomas, although in the Gospel of John, he's also called Didymus. We then have Matthew, the tax collector. He's called Matthew in Matthew, Mark, Luke. Mark and Luke both also refer to him as Levi, and he's not mentioned in the Gospel of John. In Acts, he's mentioned as Matthew. We then have James, the son of Alphaeus, is mentioned in all the references except the Gospel of John, not mentioned. We then have Thaddeus. Thaddeus is called Thaddeus by Matthew and Mark, but is known as Judas, Judas, son of James, or Judas, not the Iscariot, in Luke, John, and the Acts of the Apostles. We then have Simon, the Canaanite or the Canaanian, Simon, who is called the Zealot in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, not mentioned in John, and called Simon the Zealot in the Acts of the Apostles. And then we have the notorious Judas Iscariot in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and he's referred to as just Judas, son of Simon Iscariot in John. And Judas is replaced by Matthias in the Acts of the Apostles early on. I think you know that. And so regardless of what they are named, it's clear that Jesus found in each of them a quality or an aspect that he was looking for in building his team. These are the specific men that he surrounded himself with. And that is the focus of my thoughts when I reflect on these 12 men of Jesus. The question I have for myself is, who am I surrounding myself with? Now, most people are aware of the concept behind advisory boards or boards of advisors. These are collections of suitable, qualified individuals who have various roles and responsibilities relative to the successful running of an organization. Of course, the role that such boards or advisory groups play is very much dependent on the environment and the purpose of the board. For example, one could see such boards used in corporate, nonprofit service organizations, in law, in banking, in college, in K-12 education, and in others where they may have simply advisory roles. They may have fiduciary responsibilities. They may serve in legal capacities. There may be fundraising responsibilities and others. However, for our purpose today, let's just say, for the sake of simplicity, that advisory boards serve three basic purposes. Number one, they provide good advice. So advice on taking advantage of opportunities and avoiding making mistakes, all in order to advance the goals of the organization. They play role number two, serve in some oversight or accountability role for past decisions, which feed into current and future decisions and the decision-making processes. And then three, in accomplishing number one and number two, to be disconnected or insulated from the effects of the advice and decisions that they give. In other words, they should be free and able to not just rubber stamp or endorse the decisions and recommendations advanced in the organization, but rather have a role of challenging those decisions, of being a sounding board to challenge those kinds of decisions. And so advisory boards, which again are found in many or most organizations, have an important role. And why am I talking about advisory boards in the context of Mark chapter 3, verses 13 through 19? Well, it's because what I see in Jesus' forming and gathering of his 12 apostles is him selecting and putting around himself people to advance his goals. And if Jesus forms and puts 12 men around him in support of his mission, perhaps that's a model for us. A question: is there a role in our lives for a small group, perhaps 3 or 4 people, to serve as our own personal advisory boards who would help us ultimately achieve our goals in many domains of life? For instance, in our spiritual life. In our faith walk, such a team could help us stay grounded, avoid sin, collaborate with us, and someone to be accountable to. They could help us formulate, plan, and implement acts that the Lord is leading us to and calling us to. Think how you would respond if a trusted friend or family member asked you to be on their personal advisory board. I would be honored and would probably say yes. Perhaps there are those that, like us, would be honored if we asked them to be on our advisory board. In today's gospel, Jesus' 12 apostles are named by Mark, men he chose to stand by and draw close to him in his mission. This is a model that we can learn from and use in our lives. Thank you for joining the Daily Scripture Podcast. My name is Dr. Jerome Lavelle. And remember, our word today is Personal Advisory Board for Christ. Until next time, be well and be blessed.